supposedly to visit with the adults. Willie could see that her son had a better material life than she could give him. He wore better clothes than her other children, and had toys that she could not buy them. He was also loved, and perhaps even spoiled in his new family. Aunt Molly's youngest child was a 20-year-old girl named Bertie, who was especially fond of him. Still, Willie sometimes returned home in tears after a visit, and spoke wistfully of someday being able to go get little Buddy and bring him back. But it was not to be. Willie died in childbirth a few years later. Aunt Molly was very possessive of the boy, perhaps in reaction to having had the other little boy taken away from her after she had become attached to him. Whatever the reason, when she eventually moved away from North Carolina to New York, some relatives said that she did it to put distance between the boy and those who knew the family secret that he was adopted. Though there were, in fact, other, more compelling reasons to move to New York, it is significant that those who knew her could believe that she would do it to preserve her secret. In any event, she severed all links between the boy and his past. His brothers and a sister in North Carolina all knew of his existence, but he did not know of theirs, and they heard about him as he grew up in New York only through the family grapevine. His original family continued to refer to the boy as Buddy, but he never heard that name as he grew up, for his new family renamed him in infancy. Bertie prevailed upon Aunt Molly to name him after her boyfriend, Thomas Hancock. Aunt Molly's legal name was Mamie Sowell. My earliest memories were of Mama and Daddy, and Bertie and Ruth. Daddy was my favorite, and I was his. He was a construction worker, a short man, and an elder in the church until I came along. One of the scenes that came down in family legend was his standing up in front of the congregation with me in his arms and a baby bottle in his pocket, explaining that he now had new duties to take the place of those he was resigning in the church. Daddy had a certain gruffness about him, but was usually good-natured with people and was extremely patient with me. However, he became angry whenever he thought anyone was not treating me right. He would fuss with Mama if he found out that she had spanked me while he was at work. I was, of course, the usual source of this information. Once he almost got into a fight with a man on the street who inadvertently frightened me by pointing his walking stick in my general direction while trying to give another man directions. Mama was more enigmatic, with changeable moods. A woman with very little education, she wrote her name with painful slowness. She was nevertheless shrewd and even manipulative, but she was also emotional and subject to an unpredictable sentimentality which sometimes brought her to tears over small things. Bertie and I were very close in those early years, and remained so on into my teens. She taught me to read before I was 4 years old. We read stories in the comics together, so some of the first words I learned to spell were words like pow and splash. Bertie also read to me some of the usual children's stories. One story that I found sad at the time but remembered the rest of my life was about a dog with a bone who saw his reflection in a stream and thought that the dog he saw had a bigger bone than he did. He opened his mouth to try to get the other dog's bone, and, of course, lost his own when it dropped into the water. There would be many occasions in life to remember that story. Bertie gave me most of the mothering I received in these early years, with Mama being more concerned with teaching me practical things and maintaining discipline. But Mama also put some of her practical responsibilities on Bertie or others. One summer, when I was playing outside barefoot, as Southern kids did then, I stepped on some jagged glass and suffered a bad gash on the bottom of my foot. As I came running up the long back stairs, crying and yelling and trailing a stream of blood, Mama came out on the back porch, took one look at the scene, and seemed to turn sick. She said, "Oh gosh," and went back inside to lie down on the sofa, sending Bertie out to take care of me. Bertie soon had me calmed down and comforted, and my foot bandaged up. Ruth was a few years older than Bertie, and was a more reserved person, with an occasional enigmatic smile and a more worldly air about her. But she was softer and warmer than her more sophisticated exterior would suggest. However, to me, Ruth was always an adult, while Bertie and I sometimes played roughhouse together as if we were both kids. A fifth person who entered my life so early that I was unaware of a time when I did not know him was Bertie's new boyfriend, Lacey. He was a debonair young man with a gift for words and a way of jauntily tilting his head as he strode along. In later years, after he and Bertie were married, he would recall that the first time he saw me I was swinging on the front gate, with my diapers very much in need of changing. Lacey was to become a major influence in my formative years, especially after Daddy and Mama broke up and we moved to New York. Though it would be many years later before I would understand Lacey's background, he had himself been adopted and had not always been treated well. He not only took a special interest in me, but was also quick to speak up if he thought I was being unfairly punished or even unfairly criticized. Over the years, he many times charmed Mama out of punishing me. A more remote figure was Mama's oldest child, Herman, who was married and lived in the country on his own farm. Herman was a dignified, even stuffy individual. He also owned a car, which to us was a sign of prosperity well beyond our reach. He was not a fan of mine, nor I of his. We seldom saw each other, however, and showed no sign of suffering from each other's absence. Herman's wife, Iola, was an attractive woman with a certain genteel quality, and she had several children from an earlier marriage. One of them, Gladys, was about 3 years older than me. One Sunday, when I fell asleep in church, Gladys picked me up and held me on her lap. When I woke up, I was outraged at the indignity of having a mere girl holding me like a baby. I tore loose from Gladys' embrace and punched her. Apparently, this shocked even Herman's low expectations of me. By this time, Bertie was in her mid-20s. Ruth was around 30, and Herman was in his early 40s. This meant that Mama was already elderly when I was a small child, more like my grandmother than my mother. My grandmother was, in fact, her sister. They were part of the first generation of our family born after slavery. The first house I remember our living in was a wooden house at 1121 East Hill Street in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was near the bottom of a tall hill on an unpaved street, like most of the streets in the black neighborhoods. Daddy put a paved walkway in our yard and made a little window in the kitchen door in the back. Both were marks of distinction in which we took pride. Like most of the houses in the area, ours had no such frills as electricity, central heating, or hot running water. There was a living room, a kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. In the kitchen there was a wood-burning stove with the brand name Perfection on it. They said it was the first word I spelled. The toilet was a little shed on the back porch. To take a bath, you heated water on the kitchen stove and poured it into a big metal portable tub. For heat in the winter, we had the stove, a fireplace in the living room, and a kerosene heater. For light at night, we had kerosene lamps. It never occurred to me that we were living in poverty, and in fact, these were some of the happiest times of my life. We had everything that people around us had, except for a few who had electricity and one lady who had a telephone. Once I tagged along with Ruth when she went to her job as a maid in the home of some white people. When I saw 2 faucets in their kitchen, I was baffled and said, "They sure must drink a lot of water around here." When Ruth showed me that there was hot water coming out of one of the faucets, I thought it was the most amazing thing. We grew flowers in our front yard, but there was no backyard, just an alleyway. On the side of the house, however, there was a space fenced in where we kept chickens. I can still remember the shock of seeing a chicken's head chopped off and watching the headless body running frantically around the yard until it collapsed in the convulsions of death. But all that was forgotten when it reappeared hours later at dinner, completely transformed into beautiful and delicious pieces of southern fried chicken. Here and there I encountered white people, usually grocers, peddlers, or occasionally policemen. But white people were almost hypothetical to me as a small child. They were one of the things that grown-ups talked about, but they had no significant role in my daily life.